Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the support tier list for 1022. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream every night around midnight Eastern Standard Time, only on YouTube. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And then check out the rest of the content as well. We do fresh tier lists, patch notes, and all sorts of other topical guides as well. I'm going to have a ton of content for the upcoming preseason, and I just released last week kind of a greatest hits tips guide for the 5 best things you can do to gain a lot of ELO really quickly down the stretch here near the end of the season to help you reach your goals for those rewards. So be sure to check all that out. And I am going to start off this video just going over the patch notes a little bit and then a meta overview, and then we'll get to the picks. I will include talking about Seraphine and Annie and where I think they're going to fit in. So we're going to try to fit a lot in here. So just check out the timestamps in the description if you want to jump around your favorite parts. Okay. Let's talk just real quickly about these patch notes. I'm just combining the patch notes with the tier list on this video just because I don't think it's going to shake up the meta too much probably. So we'll just go over this relatively quickly and try to combine it with this one. Also have an all-role tier list probably the next couple of days for the other 4 roles as well. So check that out. So Seraphine, we'll go over her individually here in just a second, but I don't think that she's going to be that strong right out the gate. She's okay. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think she'll be terrible, but I don't think she'll be great either. We'll go over that more in just a little bit in detail. Curse of the Sad Mummy, so they're changing this into a stun from a root. All right, probably not going to matter most of the time. This does mean that you can't cleanse yourself with Mikhail's, so that's something that might change, but as far as the rest of it, I don't think it's going to matter. Because it disarms you as well, this will be a little bit better against casters, because casters, I believe, can still cast spells while they're rooted. So this will mean that people can't cast stuff, but they already couldn't attack because it disarms. Usually if you're rooted, you can still attack and cast spells, you just can't move. So I guess this will make it a little bit better against people that are trying to use their abilities, because now you can use it as an interrupt. I think roots interrupt channels, but now you can use it as basically a silence as well. So it's better. It'll help him, but I don't think overall it's going to make him super strong right now. I don't think he's necessarily a terrible spot. He just takes a little while to come online. He can get invaded and beaten up early. He has a really long cooldown on his ult, but he can do quite a bit of damage once he gets Sorcerer Boots plus Oblivion Orb. He can snowball pretty hard off of the mid game if you're able to hit those binds and get off some good ganks. So I don't think he's terrible. This will help him out a little bit. It's fine. Okay, Annie, we'll talk about her more specifically as well in terms of the support role. They're basically making her E into a shield and taking away its damage reduction that it gives you personally, so it potentially could make her a little bit of a better support just because you can actually do something to help your allies out, but I don't think it's going to be as good as people are probably going to make it out to be, just because it's not a great one-point wonder, and I still think you want points in all 3 of your abilities, and that usually makes it very difficult to try to optimize your builds. Usually a lot of the best supports, you want to have one thing that's a good one-point wonder where you just put 1 point in it and it's effective, because you're not going to be able to get much past level 13 to level up that 3rd skill a lot of time as support. So anyway, she'll be all right. We'll talk about her separately here in a second. Ashe, some people are marketing this as a buff. I think this is a nerf most of the time on Ashe. It's less arrows early. If you're maxing W first, then you break even at level 5, and then you start to get a couple more arrows at level 10. But this doesn't really increase your damage that much. What it does do is it makes it less likely you're going to poke people in lane. So they're trying to market this as, we want you to put more points in this, but what this means is you're not putting more points in your Q, which is your huge DPS boost to single targets. So if you want, this bonus where you have a wider arc radius on your W and it's more likely you can poke, then it's going to be less likely that you're going to have your damage as Q. Now, I'm not sure what a lot of Ashes are leveling up. If they are maxing W or Q, it probably depends on the situation, but I think this will definitely be a nerf to her early game, where it's going to be harder to hit some of that poke, but realistically, it's probably not going to matter that much. 7 arrows is still probably enough to spread around the wave and hit people with poke. Okay, Brand is getting a couple of changes, so his explosion is less damage. This is going to be less pre-6 single target burst off of Blaze, and then your conflag now always spreads to nearby enemies. So you can use this basically on a minion wave to light everyone up and then hit it with a W, and that'll give you better wave clear if you're like a solo lane Brand. So that's good. And then if you already have a blaze on somebody, then you can press E to spread it to 600 range. So I guess it's possible if you open with like an ult or something in a team fight, then you can press E to get that con flag to spread to a bunch of different people. So the first person that you hit with ult in a team fight, if you immediately con flag them, it'll spread to everybody else, and then you can hit them with your, W or your stun to get extra damage or, all of that good stuff. So it's okay. I mean, it's mostly just for wave clear with mid lane brand. I don't think it'll impact support brand that much, but it's all right. And then the R actually will matter quite a bit if you get isolation kills, because now it can bounce to you. Okay, well now it's saying that you can't get insta burst if you flash on somebody. So I don't know. Like, this is something that's difficult to quantify. It says it's going to stick to brand a little bit longer. So if you try to flash on somebody in Pyroclasm, then it's not just going to instantly blow them up effectively. So I don't know how long it sticks. Slightly longer. So, I mean, are we talking like a quarter of a second, a half a second? I don't know what that means, but anyways, like, a big problem with brand is if you had somebody isolated and you pressed R on them, it would only hit them once, but now it can bounce back and forth and hit them the 3 times, although there is this stickiness aspect to it. So I think it'll help support brand out a little bit, but I still don't think he's going to be that great just because his items are still just so expensive. Like, you can get the Sork boots and Oblivion Orb, and that gives you a nice, early to mid game power spike between like 12 and 15 minutes. But then you got to go all the way up to Leandri's after that most of the time, and that's just going to take you like 10 minutes to complete that item as support brand unless you're just snowballing real hard. So he does apply a decent amount of poke early and pressure, and he does have some all-in threat, but like most other AP champions and, just any DPS champions in the bot lane, their items are just so expensive, and when you're having to buy 3,100 gold items and, the enchanter supports are buying, 2,000 gold items and you're paying like 50% more for a lot of your items, then you're going to fall behind pretty quickly. So and it's just, he's very vulnerable. He can be ganked and blown up. It's difficult to rotate. He's slow. If he gets caught out in the river, he doesn't have a lot of escapes. So he can be very good, especially if the enemy team has at least 3 or 4 melees, if they're all going to bunch up, because he does have quite a bit of just innate base damage because of his percentage health damage off of his passive. So he does do quite a bit, and that can bring a lot of damage to your team, especially if they're all bunched up. If you need an AP source, if you have all AD, he could be a pretty good option, but I don't think this is going to change his overall position too much, and I don't think he's going to be played mid for similar reasons. He's just so vulnerable. But he's okay. It's nice they're giving a little love there. But something's got to change with the itemization in order to make him a little more viable, I think. Okay, Justice Punch. It has a minimum dash distance, so it's probably bad. That gives you less control over it. So it could make you overcommit to a dash if you're just trying to point blank somebody. So I'm not really sure. It says that it's to help people with accidental zero range E's. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to matter that much. Jinx, upfront damage on her chompers. Okay, this is good. This could help her burst people out a little bit faster, which does matter when you kill somebody. You get that reset. You get to reposition with your movement. You attack a lot faster. So if somebody hits your chompers, having that upfront damage might let you kill them. Potentially a second faster. And that's a big deal. So I think this is nice. I think Jinx is a little underrated in the meta right now. I think she is pretty good. If you have a support that can peel for her, she does do a lot of damage. She has a lot of wave clear, a lot of range, very good scaling, great crit user. So I think she's a bit underrated. She's just vulnerable, so you got to have some protection for her. But I think she's pretty good. Karthus, less damage on the Q, so that's going to hurt his wave clear. That's going to hurt his DPS in fights a lot. It's going to hurt him mid lane. It's pretty rough because remember, it's double damage when they're isolated, so it's basically taking 10 damage off of his Q, and when you're talking about 10 damage on a Q on an ability that you can cast every 1 second and effectively spam, that would be the equivalent of taking like 60 damage off of something with a 6-second cooldown, or 100 damage off of something that is a 10-second cooldown, which are like most trading things in lane early on are about 10 seconds or so. So I think that that's a pretty big deal. Now, yes, he's not going to hit all of them, so it's not quite as bad as a 10-second trading ability, losing 100 damage, but it's a lot. It's a lot of damage. So don't let this fool you because of the cooldown and just how much you spam it. It's a very big deal. If you think of it percentage-wise, he's losing 10% of his damage on it. It's a lot. So we'll see. I already don't think he's that great in the meta right now. I mean, I don't know why they're nerfing him. I guess in high elo, he has a decent win rate, and he's frustrating to play against because he just power farms and presses R. There's a lot of counters in the meta to him right now, though. I think that Nidalee, can invade him. Graves can beat him up. Now, Graves is weaker to magic users in general, but I don't know. Whatever. They nerfed him. I don't think it's going to affect the vast majority of players, though. Ethereal Chains. Take it down to 50 mana so you can spam this more often. I believe this is what you max last. I know you max Q first. It might depend on the situation if you max W or E. I really don't like LeBlanc, by the way. I think she's a really toxic champion, and they need to rework her W to where she can't basically insta-dash like 1400, take a shot at you, and then zip back to where she was without many consequences if you don't have a point-click hard CC. But if they are going to buff her, I like that they are buffing this ability because this is actually a skill shot that she has to land, unlike her Q or her W. So I guess this is alright. It's adding 10 extra damage to the ability. Actually, it's 20 because it triggers twice, I believe. So, okay, I don't think that's going to matter that much, but it's a good change. Okay, well, if they're going to change her, if they want to buff her, that's one of the safer ways to do it. Okay, Lulu. So Lulu top's been a problem. So actually they did manage to find a way to nerf Lulu top that's not going to affect Lulu support hardly at all. So good job, right? So they're nerfing her Q max top by 40 damage, which is a lot late games. They really want to take her out of solo lanes, which is probably good. She's a little toxic when she is in solo lanes in pro play. Yeah, it does open up and enables kind of like hard carry junglers, which is becoming meta. You're seeing that a lot at Worlds right now in terms of you're seeing Graves and then Kindred and stuff like that. And Lulu is very good with those types of champions. So I think this is good. But support Lulu, you're not going to get multiple points in Q most of the time. A lot of times you're going to max E and then W, or like 3 points in E and then max W up to level 10. So this really shouldn't affect support Lulu that much, which is good. Okay, Nasus, he's getting his resistances up front. This is going to help him a lot in the early game because he gets 1 per second. So after 15 seconds in combat, because I think this stays up for 15, then he would get 30 resistances at level 6. Then he would get 50 at level 11, and he's getting 55. And then, or no, he gets 2 per for there. So he would get 30, so he would get 65. So that's a loss later on in the fight at level 11. And then it's a loss in DPS pretty quickly after 5 seconds at level 16. So it makes him a lot better early game, and then as he goes up, it makes him a little bit worse as the fight goes on in longer fights, but he's still going to be better up front when he casts it. So I don't think this is going to be make a huge difference with him. It might. It might help him enough in the early game to where he can start scaling towards later, so we'll see. I just feel like there are better champions if you just kind of want to take over later. I don't know. Nasus is a tough call because he can feel completely OP and unstoppable. If he gets several items and lots of stacks, it's very, very difficult to deal with him. But at the same time, like, you can shut him down early, so we'll see. I think he'll still be sort of niche top, pretty good against tanks if they just let him farm up his Q. He's going to be pretty strong, but he can still get pressured out and ganked pretty easily. Okay, Samira still on the strong side. I think she's a little overrated. Honestly, everyone trips and she gets banned every game. She is very good in the right hands, but I don't think her win rate was too far out of line. It's like 51% on this patch. She is banned 76% of the time because she is a high risk. If she does start going off, it's difficult to stop her, and a lot of people just really hate win wall abilities, right, which her W is. So, anyways, I always feel like these nerfs aren't a big deal where they just like tap the AD and tap like the armor and stuff like that, but sometimes it can completely knock 3 or 4% off a champion. So I guess you got to be careful with these kind of nerfs, but taking off 2 of her base attack damage, it is kind of a big deal because she does have very good scaling on her abilities, and the base damage is extremely low on her Q, and pretty much everything does almost no base damage but has really high scaling. So maybe this matters a bit more than it seems. It's kind of a 2 AD meme. But the fact that she's losing 2 armor also is going to make her a bit more susceptible to early trades, and she's already not that great in the early game. So we'll see. It'll probably take her down, maybe 1%. Might bring her closer to 50%. Although, who knows? Maybe this is going to be one of those really big hits that knocks her below 50. We'll see. Okay. Sejuani, so they're adding on an extra 25 damage if you hit them point blank with the R, and they're adding 25 point blank and then 50 max value. And then it looks like you're also getting extra damage on the explosion at max range. So they'll give her a pretty good amount of extra damage. So we'll see. I still think that Nunu's going to be the better CC tank out there, even after some of his most recent nerfs. But I don't know. Maybe this is enough to bring her back in. I don't remember all the nerfs they did to her. I know that they hit her damage pretty hard. They hit her tankiness first off of her passive and its interaction with Aftershock. And then they ended up hitting her damage, I believe, off of her E. So off of the break on her Frozen. I think it used to always be 20%. Now it scales 15, 10, 15, 20. I don't remember exactly, but this will help her out a little bit. I still think she's probably not going to be that great in the meta overall, but we'll see. Maybe it's enough to bring her back. Zaya's getting an extra 0.6% attack speed growth per level. I don't think this is going to matter. Zaya's big problem is that she needs her ult cooldown reverted, or like at least moved down to 140, because she relies very heavily on that for her kit. That's her burst damage, that's her peel, that's like her big contribution to team fights are her ult. And the fact that she has, kind of this, team fight oriented ultimate, really it's like she has to use it for personal safety a lot of times too. A lot of other champs that have those kind of personal safety type of ults and personal use mechanisms don't have a cooldown that long. Like 160 is like, this is an extremely powerful team fight tool most of the time. It's like an Amumu ult or a Janna ult or something like that. So I don't know. I just don't like it being that much. I think it should be a 140 for like a moderate, team fight type of ability, like a Rakan. So anyways, this will help, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Like level 10, you get an extra 6% attack speed. Okay. All right, Zed, the slash is doing a little bit less damage, so 20 less damage. Okay. That's going to hurt his wave crew a little bit. I'm pretty sure you max this second, you max Q first. So this isn't even going to matter in the laning phase. It's really only like in the kind of early roaming, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, somewhere in there. So it'll bring him down a little bit, but I don't think it's going to matter that much, honestly. Because he's still just going to cast this once per rotation, I believe, when he tries to all-in somebody. I guess losing 20 damage might matter, but probably not. Then the rest of this stuff, probably not going to matter. Okay, so overall, I don't think a lot of this stuff's going to impact the meta. Sejuani, might gain a percentage or two, could be good. Samira might fall a percentage or two. Lulu out of solo lanes. He's going to hurt solo lanes a bit. LeBlanc probably doesn't matter, helps out a little bit. Karthus hits him really hard, but he's almost never played under Diamond. Jinx, good. Galio doesn't matter. Brand, good. Ashe, good nerf. Annie, interesting. Probably a bait. Amumu, good buff. So, probably not going to matter that much. Okay, so let's talk about the support tier list overall here. So, it's still going to be a lot of low CC junglers. You got Kha'Zix and Graves. Nidalee's really popular right now, too. So, like, a bunch of carry junglers. Then you have Hecarim and Nunu. Now Hecarim does have some CC on him with his ult, obviously, and then Nunu's extremely good, but still not picked a ton. He's picked some, but you got split pusher tops mostly, like carry tops. Your Fiora and Camille are extremely strong, very popular. You got Shin, who's really strong up there. Then you still have, your Darius's, your Garens, that type of stuff. So still mostly split pushing type of tops. Jungle pathing still goes bottom to top 90% of the time, so that means you kind of have open season to harass, for the first 4 to 5 minutes in the bot lane. Early power ADCs I still think are going to be the big ticket here. Do not buy Tear of the Goddess. Just stop if you're an ADC, please. So nothing with Tear. We want stuff with BF Sword that hits really hard off of that first BF Sword purchase. You can snowball really hard early on in the game, because if you don't, it's hard to be relevant as an ADC. Like, you're not going to get to 3 items. You're not going to get your Mer mana most of the time in a lot of games, or at least it's going to be really late. And you just have to be relevant early, or just these assassins and these skirmishers are just going to run all over you. So, Draven, Jhin, Misfortune, and then Ashe. Now, Ashe doesn't have as much burst early, but she's got a lot of utility. Still a great slow. Arrow can make plays. Great to chain CC with Nautilus or Leona or whoever your partner is in the bot lane. So I think that those are probably still going to be the best ones. Okay, and then we'll talk about Annie and Seraphine really quickly. I think that, I thought I changed. Okay, this should be adjusted a little bit. I thought I adjusted this, but I must have readjusted it. We'll mess with that here in a second. There we go. But Seraphine, I think, is going to come in around tier 3 in my book, so she'll be playable. It's possible that she could be pretty good, but I think she's going to be overrated by a lot of people. Now, some people are calling her Sona 2.0. I think she plays very differently than Sona. I've watched some videos on her. She's a lot closer to something like a Lux, who's going to be poking from long distance with a Q most of the time, trying to build up her charges and then look for those stuns off of her E. Her base stats are extremely low. She's very, very vulnerable. Even more so, I think, than Sona and Janna. And she's very weak. So it's 500 base health. So that's pretty low. 6.5 regen. And then 19 armor. I just want to compare this really quickly and just see like what the armor is on some of these other champs. Yeah, Janna has like 28 armor. 19 is like absurdly low for somebody that doesn't have any sort of abilities that like buff armor or give resistances. And I can remember that's ridiculous. It's like they basically get a free Sari to Dirk when they're fighting against you. Maybe even more than that. They get 10 free armor pin on you. Now Sona, maybe Sona's that low. No, Sona has 28 as well, so that's like, I mean, that's low. Like, you're already going to get blown up. But this is like, I mean, if Jhin hits you with a 4th shot, he might just one-shot you at level 1. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's like really, really rough on the low armor. And then 325 movement speed with very limited other movement speed buffs. You have your W, which is on like a 30-second cooldown or something early game to give you a little bit of movement speed, but in general, you are just going to have a huge bullseye on your head for ganks or for engaged champions, which are very popular right now. You've got your Leona, your Nautilus, Rakan, Bard. All of those are very strong and very popular. So you have to be extremely careful with her. She doesn't have any sort of dashes, no real peel or ways to disrupt. I mean, you've got your empowered E, I guess, for a root, but extremely vulnerable. Extremely vulnerable. So that's going to be rough, especially for trying to rotate. Like, you're going to be slow to get there, and if anyone catches you out in the river, like, you know, the other support or the jungler or anybody, you're probably going to die. Assassins, you know, rotate on you and dive you at tower. It's going to be rough out there. Okay, so her stage presence, basically every time you cast an ability, you get a stack of this, and then at 2 stacks. So basically every 3rd spell, it's going to double. It's going to double cast the 3rd spell. And you build up notes around you. So this is why I think she's going to be solo lane much more than mid lane is you want other people around you when you're casting your spells, because pretty much every other person around you, whenever you cast a spell, it empowers your next basic attack to gain a lot of extra range, and then it's also going to gain some extra magic damage as well. So if you have like, you know, every 100 AP, you're going to get 7.5 damage on it. So, you know, in the mid game, you're going to get like an extra, I don't know, 15 to 20 damage on your auto attack and 25 range. So if you cast 2 spells and you're close by, obviously, and one other person's close by, you know, you're going to get an extra 60 damage on your next auto, and it's going to have 100 extra range. So it's okay. I mean, it can be a big deal in team fight when 5 people are around. You know, that can start to add up. You get an extra like 100 to 150 damage every time you cast a spell, and then you get an extra like 125 range on your autos. This would obviously be very good with something like Lichbane, but that's a very expensive item. Like I was talking about earlier with Bran, that's a 3,200 gold item. So it makes you want to buy AP items with her, but she'll probably just end up getting Athene's Ardent Censer. But being able to Lichbane that just because you're going to have really long auto attack range could be good, but seems difficult to acquire. And then like her base damages are absolutely abysmal with extremely low scaling. So it's all balanced around you getting those second spells often. But when you don't have the second spell, when you're not echoing these abilities, it's almost no damage, right? 55 base damage, only goes up 10 per level with a 55% AP ratio. That's gross, and it costs 65 mana early on, so it's not even that cheap. Now, it does have 90 damage, or 900 range, which is good, and it has a huge hitbox of 350. So it's gonna have less range than a Lux E, but I think it's faster. And so it'd probably be a little bit easier to hit this. But now when it's empowered, it can do some, like if you echo this, so if it can execute if they're low on health, so up to 50% extra damage. And if you echo this, so this, if you get like 3 points of this for the laning phase, it can do like have a 1.6 AP ratio and do like 225 damage. So that's pretty good. And it does go from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds. So as you put points in this, you can spam it, but I don't know. I mean, getting down to 5 seconds on something and being able to do, you know, up to 140 damage that could be doubled is like, it's all right. Surround sound, now this one is just like the definition of a 1-point wonder, but once again has like almost literally zero scaling. Like, all that you get for putting a point in this is 1 second lower on the cooldown. That's actually it. There's no, like, none of these things scale with the amount of points that you put in this. It's all based on per level and AP ratios. Now, this is pretty good. Like, if you, like, empower this in a team fight, it will give back an extra 5% of everybody's missing health, and it gives them a decent shield. It's not insane. I mean, you know, at level 9, it's a 90 shield. You know, by comparison, something like a Janna Shield's 240 when you get it maxed out at level 9, or Lulu's going to be 240. So that's rough. Now, you can hit multiple targets with this, but it's looking rough out there. The effect radius is 800, so it's pretty far, but I don't know. Like, it does a lot of stuff. It does give movement speed for 2.5 seconds. It does have okay scaling on the shield. Like, if you hit all 5 people with this, you know, in a team fight, you know, that'd be 450 shield with a 1.5 AP ratio. So that is pretty good. If you hit everybody and you give that extra movement speed too, 8% extra movement. So it's kind of like a Sona E plus W if you cast that, but like bigger range on a much longer cooldown. Now the thing is, Sona spams her stuff a lot, and so that makes her really good with things like Athene's and Ardent Sensor, because you can keep that aura up all the time on people, and you're constantly adding out extra shielding and healing and all that kind of stuff. So versus, like, she is much more about building up, you know, burst, like key burst moments where you like beat drop to get that stun on multiple people, and then you like use your W to get your team to run in. So she has like lots of moments of vulnerability when she doesn't have her double spells. She's pretty worthless when she doesn't have them, but she can be good when she does. So this is her one saving grace, is beat drop, and it's on kind of a long cooldown, but it has a huge radius of like 1300. And when you double cast this, it will effectively root people. It could stun people. They're already rooted, but the damage is a little more respectable. It can get up to 160. Now, if you double tap somebody with this, it's 320 with a 0.7. 9 second cooldown's kind of long, but I don't know. I'm just not sure. It feels like you want to level up your E and your Q, because this is like your poke, so usually that's what you want to level up, but you really want this higher, probably, because it has your best scaling. Right, so this only has 10 scaling. This at least has 25 per level scaling. And this is like an AoE like stun, potentially in a team fight. So you kind of want this leveled up, but then it's like, this is going to be a really long cooldown, 10 seconds. So to get your double spell, I don't know, it just feels kind of bad. Like, whichever one you level, it just feels like the other one's going to be really weak. Then your Encore is like good. It's kind of like a Sona ult. So you can chain that, like the combo is you chain together, you know, like your Encore with your beat drop, and then you get 3 spell casts. You get a ton of notes, and you can just like, you know, clap somebody for a lot of damage off of that. And then Really long range on this, 1200, 1300 range on this. You could AoE, CC a ton of people for a long duration, right? Early game, like 1.25 charm duration, and then this roots for 1 second, so you can get a 2.25 AoE root, which is about 50% longer stun than Sona, but it does require some setup, and it's a 160-second cooldown, so it's a really long cooldown. So I don't know. I mean, she's got poke, she's got a really good burst, like AoE, type of damage when everything's up and the stars align. She can look extremely powerful, but you've got to set up these specific moments of power. And she's just going to be really weak otherwise. So she's okay. I just think that she's going to be very, very vulnerable both to all-in and to poke. And I think that that's not a great place to be because she doesn't have hardly any sustain at all. So if you're sitting there and, just like a Lux or a Sona or Janna are just spamming spells on you in the laning phase, it feels like you're going to get busted up. Or if Leona or Nautilus ever gets a hold of you. So I'm not really sure the situation, like, where you'd want her. Versus Sona can at least spam her Q with Airy and, like, have pretty good poke in the laning phase. And then she can sustain through, if she gets enough mana, she can sustain through poke from the enemy with her W. Because it's a heal, right, on a low cooldown. Versus this W, like, is just intended to be, for those, just that really powerful, like, 5-person, burst. So, I don't know. She's okay, but I think her numbers are a little flat. I think they're coming in, like, very safe on her here. Like, they don't want her to be overpowered, so I think they'll end up buffing her at some point. Okay, Annie's the other one that I think most people will be interested in, so we'll talk about Annie here. I think this is kind of a bait. I think that it looks like this could be something that could be really good. Wow, her armor is extremely low, too. Holy crap. 19 armor. Jeez. I thought Sona and Janna were low at like 28, but yeah, she's going to get annihilated because you're putting her in the bot lane, so she's going to be at least against one AD champion, and a lot of champs down there, not a lot, but a decent chunk are going to be AD. You've got your Pikes, your Pantheon still kind of popular, Senna, so, they can put some bad matchups into you early on. A little bit better movement speed, so 335 movement speed, and at least she has a shield for herself, and she can give herself that little bit of extra burst movement, a little bit more health. So I think she's going to be slightly safer than Seraphine, most likely. But if you think about the way that, like, Annie's supposed to operate early on, she's supposed to have, potentially, like, easy last hitting with her Disintegrate, and then she's just supposed to get a lot of damage and just press R, Tibbers you, and just roll her hand across the keyboard and delete you with Incinerate and Disintegrate. Now, these both have, like, decent base damage and decent AP ratios, but they really don't offer a lot of utility other than, the stun off of casting every, however many spells. Every 4th spell, I think, is a stun. No, it's every 5th spell. And then she gets a decent stun in there. So why has she not been a great support for a long time? You have to answer that question. So, the big thing that's holding her back is, I think, as a support, is that she doesn't really have great trading pre-6. Yes, you do have a stun, but if your stun's not up, you're really, really vulnerable. And a lot of tanks can go on you anyways and just not care if you stun them. Like a Leona or a Nautilus or whatever can still go in and blow you up because your base damages aren't that high. They're okay. But you're still going to be very, very vulnerable early game. She's still vulnerable to ganks, still can't rotate that well. However, once you do get to 6, you do a lot of damage, right? When you unload Tibbers on somebody and then drop all of your spells, that is quite a bit of damage because it does not only like a decent initial damage, but he has like this AoE aura damage. I don't remember how much he attacks, which does damage, but then he also has like this little aura, which I guess is not that much, honestly, looking at it, but I mean, I guess every 0.25 seconds, that's 25 damage per second with a, like a 12% AP ratio, so, that can get up to like 40 damage per second, or something early on when you have 100 AP, so pretty good damage when she starts it up. So what does this do for her then? So adding this Molten Shield, because like we talked about earlier, you want a 1-point wonder. So if you're a support, because you're not going to get a lot of levels. So what's her 1-point wonder, right? If you take points out of her W or her Q, you're losing a lot of your damage, and that's her whole identity is you one-shot somebody at level 6. You want points in your damage. So you're probably still going to max, probably maxing your fireball, right? Because you got to have something to trade with early on. It starts to get kind of expensive at 70 mana. Yeah, you can't be leveling this up because 90 mana I think is too much, and it's much shorter range. Well, I guess not. 600 versus 625. It is AoE, but it's weird. It does less base damage, but it scales higher. But this can hit multiple people in team fights. I don't know. Either way, you're going to level one of these. And so you have that, and then you have 1 point Disintegrate and 1 point Molten Shield. And then after that, it's like, what do? You probably just keep leveling the same thing. Like, you just max out Incinerate, I guess. That would give you more damage in team fights. Although it costs a hell of a lot more mana. Then you just don't put a lot of points in Molten Shield. I mean, you can max shield, but, like, what does that turn Annie into? Like, she would do very anemic damage. If you get, like, 3 points in shield early on, it's like, okay, you have a 140 shield, but it's still a pretty weak shield. 140 with a 0.4 ratio that's going to be on a 12-second cooldown that doesn't do that much else. Like, yeah, if someone attacks you, it's going to reflect 40 damage or something, which I guess is all right. But it's like, then you lost your whole identity. Then you don't have enough damage to kill somebody when you all in with Tibbers because you don't have enough points in your Q or your W. So it's like, okay, you got a shield, that's cool. All right, you got Tibbers, you got, Incinerate and Disintegrate, but that's just not who she is, right? That's not her identity, right? I mean, if you think about some of the other shielders out there, like Janna, why do you shield? Well, you're shielding to buy time for your AD carry. You give them extra AD when you shield them. You have extra benefit from plus healing and shielding with your ultimate, which scales really hard with plus healing and shielding and AP. That allows you to, like, use your tornado to peel them back. Like, she has a clean identity. Like, you're trying to peel and buy time for your AD carry off of your shield, and the rest of your kit is designed around that. Like, you've got a slow built in, you've got a tornado built in, you got extra scaling on the E, like I said, with the AD. Like, it just all fits into her identity to, level up that shield and be stronger with it. Same thing with Lulu, right? Your shield is also your harassment. So your shield is your damage with Lulu. You can get 3 points in shield, but that's also your point click, damage. And then it gives them picks, which translates to a lot of extra damage that scales with their attack speed. And it fits into a similar playstyle, right? You're shielding them to buy more time so they do more damage. You have your ult to help protect them. You have your polymorph to help protect them. So it all just fits into kind of who she is and doubles up as damage plus defense later, right? When you look at Annie, like, you're sacrificing a lot of damage to get this shield. And it's, like, even having 1 point in it is basically worthless. It's only a 40 shield. So, like, if you're maxing your W or your Q, it's not doing anything. So I think it almost was better beforehand when at least you got a high percentage damage reduction. And it gave you a much cleaner identity, right? It's like, okay, you personally have a pretty strong 1 point wonder that gave you whatever 14% damage reduction and increased your speed so you could go in and, open up with Tibbers on somebody, right? But now it's like you have the speed, but I think a 40 shield is going to be probably less valuable than like 17% damage reduction. I'm not sure about that, but I just don't think it changes the calculus. Annie's still going to have the same playstyle, get a bunch of AP, build to one-shot somebody and just open up and go. Like, I just don't... I mean, it does make, like, Athene's a bit more interesting, but once again, if this shield is so low, you're not going to get a lot of value out of Athene's, Because, like, Athene's can only match the amount of heal that you give out. So if you're only giving out, like, an 80 heal, right, if you have 100 AP... with Athene's plus your runes and everything. And you have 1 point in this, and you're just, like, maxing out your Disintegrate, and then your Incinerate, and then you have Tibbers. Like, okay, you can get to 240 charges really quickly off of your ult, but you're only going to be able to distribute 80 of those off of your shield because your shield's only 80. So I just don't think it works as well with her as it does with someone like Bard, where his baseline heal is going to be a lot higher, I think, off of the W. I don't know if it is, actually. But you max that second. Like, you max your W second, so eventually it's like a 150 heal. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just don't think it changes her trading patterns early. I don't think it changes how you're going to level up or how you're going to build. I mean, you can go with the Athene's Ardent, but I just don't think it's going to change. Like, she's going to have the same problems. You're still not going to max your E, probably. Just because these abilities are so bad if you don't have points in them. I don't know. They do have good AP ratio, so I don't know. Maybe you can max shield and then, just max your Incinerate second and just have 1 point in your Q, your Disintegrate early, and just use that for cheap harassment and just rely on your scaling. Just maybe get Airy or something and just poke with this and then max shield, max W for team fights. I don't know. I mean, maybe we can try it out. Maybe it's better than I think it is. I wouldn't maybe like tier 2 at the absolute max. She does have a nice AoE stun. What's the cooldown on that? It's pretty low, right? Yeah, 120 is pretty low. So I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating it. Maybe it's gonna be stronger than I think, but I'm skeptical. Okay. Last 20 minutes here. The actual tier list. We'll go through just kind of the major changes. I think that Rakan, I've been on a tear with Rakan lately. I've kind of, had a Rakan revival. If you've watched the past couple of streams, we've been like 80% on him or something. Now that's on our Smurf account recently, but nevertheless, I think a build that I've been trying out lately that I think makes him a lot more compatible with this meta is going, and I don't know, like win rate wise, I'm not sure if that's reflected or not, but I want to talk about kind of this trading pattern. Let me pull up Rakan here. Is going for the Frostfang. Going for Frostfang and then a lot of times going for an Athene's early, I think gives you much more power early on. It just kind of fits overall with what the meta is doing. So in general, like people have been going, and I've been advocating Relic Shield on Rakan for a long time and then getting Zeke's. But the problem with that is it leaves you really weak in the early game because Rakan, like, he does have pretty good trading if you have enough mana for it, because his mana gets expensive if you're going for the trades. So like a typical trade where you'd go in is you'd use your W, like at level 3, you W to go in, that's 50 mana, then you Q, that's another 60, that's 110, and then you E back out. So that's like 170 mana for that trade. But it's a very good trade because you get your W, it knocks them up, you can auto attack, Q them, and then E back out, and usually they trade almost nothing back on top of you. So you've got a piece of CC, you can go in, you can get back out, and a lot of times you're not going to take that much damage if you do that. And you get a heal on your ally, you get a shield, so if they try to trade back on your AD carry, then you're negating that trade, and you have a heal to heal yourself just in case you got hit a little bit, and it heals your AD carry back. So it's a very, very good trading pattern. The problem is you'll run out of resources doing that because it costs a lot of mana. So if you can find ways to get more mana in the early game, then you actually can be quite a force in the laning phase. If you're landing your W's. So I think that maxing W first is still going to be strong. It does lower the cooldown on this pretty substantially and has nice damage. I mean, people underestimate just how much damage this W does. I mean, it's 180 at level 3. It's a hell of a lot of damage. And then when you get this maxed, it's 290 with a 0.7 AP ratio. Like, that's hitting big. And then he has really good AP ratios in general. Even his passive has a 0.9 on it. So it increases your shield tremendously, which once again is very good for trading early. Rakan has a lot more effective health than people think he does because this shield, even in the early game, with a decent amount of AP, at level 3, is going to be shielding for, like 80 extra health. And so it might look like, oh, he only starts with 540, but really he's starting closer to 600, and it very quickly becomes 700 to 750 in the early laning phase as you get a little bit of AP and just level up a bit with that shield. And it comes back every now and then. So it's like base health that also regenerates over time. And the more that you're trading, I believe basic attacks and ability lower the cooldown. So the more that you trade, the more often that this Fae Feathers is going to be up as well. So once again, it's trying to encourage you to trade a bit more. So if you take Frostfang, then you can go in and get these hits because you're going to be able to get those 3 charges of Frostfang every 30 seconds when they refill if you're doing this trade pattern. So if you hit them with the W, auto attack, Q them, and then dash back out, that's 3 hits, that's 3 procs of Frostfang. And it gives you 50% mana regen early, which helps out a ton with this mana regeneration issue that he has in the early game. And it also gives the AP, which is going to give you more damage, but also scales with your shield, scales with your healing. Everything scales pretty well with AP. I mean, the heal off of this scales with a 0.7, and then the damage is a 0.6 there. And then your shield is a 1.6 ratio when you use both shields. So he has very, very good AP scaling. So if you go for Frostfang early, it allows you to make those aggressive trades. And then if you start to get Athenes in the early game, that allows you to pick up some Fairy Charms on your first couple of backs, which once again increases your trading. You can get AP off of your Amp Tome, and then getting the CDR off of Fiendish Codex is also very good. If you can pick that up before your first ult, it's going to give you an extra 10% cooldown on that ult. And then Chalice as well, whenever you pick that up early, is going to give you the extra health regen, so you can take some more of these aggressive trades. Scales really well with the Frostfang. Basically, the 50% mana regen that you get translates over into 50% AP, or 50% HP regeneration. And then once you complete it, it's great. It scales really well with Frostfang, so the extra 50% regen that you get off of that is going to translate over into 10 extra AP right off the bat on Athenes. And then Athenes just scales really well with a lot of the other items that you can get out there. Also, anything else that has mana regen on it, whether it's Shirelia's, which is really popular, Ardent Sensor if you want to double down on the AP and the scaling for your team, Redemption, Mikhail's is very common as well. It's not totally bad to get Athenes into Mikhail's. Yes, you do lose the health regeneration outside the laning phase, but the extra regen off of Mikhail's does give you 20 extra AP on the Athenes, so it's not a bad combination. But yeah, it just allows you to be much more aggressive. The healing is huge, off of your shield with Athenes, because you get to put up so much upfront damage. Whenever you engage with Athenes with your R plus your W plus your Q, and you've already itemized towards AP, you're going to fill up that Athenes right away. And then when you can drop back and double shield somebody, then you're going to be distributing, that 250 health pretty quickly that you could get off of Athenes. So I think that's really good, and it does make you a little bit squishier to all-in burst, because you're not going to have the resistances off of Zeke's, but it just allows you to be a lot more aggressive. And I think that's where, his major weakness has been historically, is kind of a weaker laning phase, just because your mana costs are so high and your cooldowns are so high off your W and your E. So a lot of Rakons will just take this very sort of passive role, almost like a Janna-esque role in the laning phase, where I think especially if you have the Draven, the Misfortune, the Jhin, all that stuff in the early game for those trades, then that can help push him through the early game. It actually helps him scale really well later on into the game if you can stay safe, right? As long as they don't have too much CC and too much burst, or you can position properly, I think it can work well. So with that kind of build, I like going like Mercs a lot of the time, just to get that extra little bit of resistances that you're missing off of not having Zeke's, right? And especially like Athenes has magic resist on it, so if you're against magic resist, or if you're against magic damage in the bot lane, in the jungle, or wherever, like you'll get some good magic resist. I think Athenes has 40 on it, and then if you end up getting Mercury Treads, I believe that has 25 resist on it as well, so you can get up to 60 or 70 magic resist early on off of runes and off of items, so that's pretty good. You are going to be a lot more vulnerable to AD, so you got to be careful with that if you don't get the Zeke's. But anyways, I think that's a build that could be really strong, and I've been completely dominating with Rakan lately, trying out this build. I mean, yes, it is on the Smurf, but where we've been goofing around. But yeah, I've won like 9 out of the last 10 doing that, and then we were even doing like pretty well before that when I was trying that out. But yeah, give it a shot. It might work out for you, but yeah, I think that has fixed Rakan's problem in this meta and given him a much better early game. Okay, next change is Bard. I talk about Bard all the time. He's still going to be very strong, and something that I've said for a long time is you want something that has engage in this meta, because you don't have a lot of engage tops. And jungle, you've got like Hecarim and Nunu, which people sometimes play. There's a lot of Graves, a lot of Nidalee, Kha'Zix, Kindred, all that stuff coming out of the jungle. So being able to have something that can engage is really, really strong in the support role. So Rakan obviously fills that role, but Bard does as well. And he's ranged engage, which is pretty nice if they have a lot of CC, or it's just going to be really dangerous for you to go in. Then Bard can be very good against that, right? So if they have Vhagar or like a Mumu, or just a lot of point-click CC, Malzahar, stuff like that, it might be too dangerous to play something like Rakan. Hey, thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. So he's got that ranged engage, and he's just very multifarious. There's a lot of stuff you can do with Bard and be very effective. So he's got the ranged engage, ranged harass in the early game with his auto attacks, with his Q. Puts up a surprising amount of damage, and then he can be sort of an off tank as well. If you end up getting something like a Dead Man's Plate, then you can soak up a decent chunk of damage with Guardian and Dead Man's Plate. Obviously, you don't want to like take a bunch of free damage, but it does make it more difficult for assassins to pick you off. And kind of like Rakan, he's super mobile as well. That's something I forgot to mention about Rakan that a lot of people just really underestimate unless you played him a lot. It is really hard to catch him. Like, he can go out and get deep vision into the enemy jungle, and he can rotate really quickly between lanes, and it's hard to get a hold of him because his W is a free dash, and he can use it over walls and then jump twice with his E to get back to allies. He has his ultimate, which can allow him to run away from hot situations, if an emergency arises when he's out, and the jungler finds him or something. So he's very, very difficult to run down. And it's similar with Bard. Your E just allows you to get out of a lot of sticky situations. It allows you to have some very powerful ganks with your jungler if you can control vision and come through the walls on people. So that's really good. Our great long-range engage has other utility as well. It can stop Shelly from, knocking down your towers. It can, stop Jhin or Xerath or champions like that from channeling their abilities. It can save your allies if they just got Zed ulted or a Karthus ult's coming in, or they just got engaged on and you just need to buy some time. You can throw your R on them. So lots and lots of potential there. Then you have pretty good trading in lane. Like, once that heal charges up off of your W, then you can take light trades in lane and heal through it a lot of the time. And he doesn't have to worry as much about mana regen early because he can get his chimes. So a couple of different builds on him. You can go for the Dead Man's, which allows you to roam faster, gives you a bit more survivability, a little bit more damage. Or you can go for the Athenes, which is going to make your heal a lot more powerful with your W. And it's just going to give you a bit more trading potential in the early game. So I still think that Bard is going to be very good. Lots of different items you can build on him. So yeah, he's going to be solid. And then once you start to get into the hard engage, I think Leona is a bit more favored right now just because she does have a much shorter cooldown on her ult. She does more damage early, and I think she can just put out a little bit more like single target lockdown CC than Nautilus in a lot of situations. And she can engage through minions, so it's really hard for the enemy to block you out and zone you off. So yeah, I think Leona is very good, and just going for like a traditional Zeke's and a Knight's Vow is good. You can also go Gargoyle later on if you want to, but getting that Zeke's early is very nice because then you have more mana to make more trades. I suppose you could itemize into something like Presence of Mind and the Tenacity Rune, and that would also help out with your mana in a lot of situations. So Leona's still going to be solid. Nautilus, still going to be pretty good. He does have a much lower win rate than Leona, and I think the big issue here is he's a lot squishier early game. Like, his W is okay, it's a nice shield, but Leona's is very, very powerful with Aftershock, reducing the base damage from all of the minions and all the auto attacks and just little things like Scorch and just little chip damage that you get. She just negates that hardcore early on with her W, so she's very, very difficult to kill and to trade with when she has Aftershock and her W up. But Nautilus does have better wave clear with his E, so that does allow you to get priority and rotate, get scuttles, get dragons, make roams. So that's something that he does bring to the table. So he's going to do more DPS later. He's going to have better wave clear, and his ultimate in a really crowded team fight is probably going to be a bit stronger just because it can CC and knock up multiple targets versus Leona's probably only going to stun one target if it stuns anybody. But anyway, so he's better probably in like later game team fights, but she's better earlier. Her ult, as I said earlier, is on a 90-second cooldown, which is a super low cooldown, and it's a very long engage range. I think it's like 1100 or 1200 versus Nautilus. His ult's like 800. So you can open with your hook with Nautilus from further away. I think it's like an 1100 range hook. But that's a lot less guaranteed. People can, hide behind like walls or minions or whatever to get away from the hook versus Leona. She can just kind of engage from anywhere, anytime. So he's good, but I think Leona's probably a little bit better if you want that kind of thing right now. And then Janna is the last one that I'll put here. She doesn't have engage, but she's very good against other engaged champions with her tornado, and her W harass in the laning phase is extremely powerful. If you take Comet or Airy or anything and just spam W on them, it's cheap, it's effective, and she has that tornado, so you can more confidently walk up if you're against something like a Leona in the laning phase and harass the ADC, and if Leona wants to do anything about it, you can just tornado and stop her from doing it. So that makes it a bit safer for her to walk up and harass than something like a Sona or, a Lulu or something like that. That's going to be much more dangerous that they could engage on you if you play those types of champs and you try to do that in front of a Leona or a Nautilus or anything like that. So yeah, pretty good. Great scaling with Ardent Sensor, with the extra AD that you put on your shield. And she can rotate around, and that's something that separates her from a lot of other enchanters, is that she's very fast with her W, and it's really hard to catch her out. So she's going to be pretty safe. Not quite as safe as something like a Rakan or a Bard, most likely, but still very, very safe. With the tornado, with the emergency ultimate button to push people off of you, and just her movement speed in general makes her difficult to catch. Especially if you put something like Swifty boots on her, so... Anyways, I think that Janna is still going to be very good if you think you're going to have superior scaling and all you have to do is peel and your team's going to win. So if you have something like a Jinx or a Twitch on your team where you have a super high scaling ADC that's going to build crit, that is going to scale really well off of that bonus AD, I think that she can be a really good answer. Or a really good complement to that type of team. Okay, then I have Lulu a little bit lower, and we'll speed it up. We're almost done here because a lot of these I talk about all the time, and there hasn't been that much of a shift in these. But Lulu, I knocked her down just a little bit. She is getting nerfed on this patch. Yes, you are not getting multiple points in Q. It will hurt you a little bit in the ultra late game. Probably not that much. It's more of just kind of a meta call where I think that she doesn't have engage. So you're kind of at the mercy of your team to be able to have that engage. And she doesn't rotate as well as Janna either. Later on, she's a bit slower. You can use your W to rotate faster, but that's taking away an important tool if you do that. I just feel like people can run down and pick her off a bit more than some of the other champions out there. She is going to offer probably higher scaling than Lulu than Janna, because you can get the attack speed with your W, and your picks gives a lot of extra on-hit damage. People underestimate just how strong that is. Around level 9 or 10, once you get Ardent Sensor, with your runes and everything, it's going to be like 80 extra, basically on-hit damage. It's on attack, so it doesn't scale with Gensu's and things like that. It doesn't work with Hurricane, but nevertheless, it's a lot of extra damage on like a Twitch or a Kog'Maw or anything else is going to be attacking really quickly. So she's good. The couple of things, so she doesn't rotate as well. She doesn't scale as well with AP because your ultimate just has very low AP ratios, and it's not a heal, it's an infusion of health, so it doesn't work with plus healing and shielding as well. But kind of the really big stuff for me early game, there's a couple of things. Number one, she's very short range, so it's 600 range on her shield specifically, and Janna's shield is 800 range. And a lot of the other enchanters outrange her. She does not have a heal in the early game, neither does Janna, but that means that you are going to be a little bit susceptible to poke. So if you're against something like a Senna, Gen Lane, or like a Xerath, Misfortune, or something like that, it's going to be rough. She doesn't have a displacement. Like, her ultimate is a knock-up, so it's sort of a displacement. But her peel is a little bit more suspicious. Like, yes, you can polymorph someone who's running at you, but they can still move while they're polymorphed and still, creep their way to the back line. So if you have a Garen running at your ADC, it's like, okay, yeah, you can polymorph him, but he's going to wake up and probably be able to still run and get on your ADC. So that's something that can be an issue in some circumstances. So short range, polymorph's also only like 600 range. So very short range for an enchanter. and you can misclick a lot of stuff, which is weird. A lot of other enchanters don't have that problem, but you know, if there is like a Xerath that's right on top of your ADC, or not a Xerath, like a Zed that's right on top of your ADC, and you try to polymorph the Zed and you accidentally whimsy your ADC is probably going to die. Or you try to shield your ADC, but you accidentally damage the Xerath, you know, your ADC is probably going to die. So yes, there are ways to work around that. When you're trying to target an ally, you can, you know, click on their portrait in the bottom right, but then you have to move your mouse from the middle of the screen down to the bottom right and then move it back up. And that can be a very big deal because you're taking your mouse away from the action. It's the same reason why people hotkey their skills and don't just click on their skill up down there, is because it might not seem like a lot. It's like, oh, you just got to move your mouse and click, but it's opening yourself up to a lot of mechanical errors with misclicking, and just, you know, you're giving yourself that little bit of extra lag pretty much by like a half a second, because you have to move from here down to here and then back up. So it's just a real pain in the butt to deal with. And that doesn't even work when there are minions. Like when there's traffic and you're trying to shield your ally, but you accidentally shield a minion. I mean, I guess you can press, like, there's a button that's like target allies only, so you can toggle that. But once again, that's going to take extra clicks. So it's like you can manage it, but it's just a real pain in the ass compared to a lot of other enchanters to try to not misclick things. Versus Janna, you just click your shield on your ally, it's going to work. You know, a lot of the times. I don't even think you can shield minions anymore with her. So anyways, so there's, you know, a higher chance for misclicks and mechanical error with Lulu than a lot of other enchanters. She's short range and she's still going to be really vulnerable. So she is very good in the right circumstances. I think that she can be solid, but those are just a couple of knocks against her versus a couple of the other options out there. Thresh, I still believe that Thresh can be strong. I might go ahead and put Blitzcrank ahead of Thresh. Let me go ahead and do that, and we'll talk about Blitz first, and we'll get to Thresh. So I kind of like Blitz a little bit better, I guess, because he is good against enchanters. So if you can hook the Janna, or even hook something like a Bard or a Rakan, you can probably blow him up. He is very one-dimensional, but if you do that one dimension really well, then he can be strong, particularly in the early game. And it's pretty much at any point in the game, if you're able to land that hook on squishies, then you probably can blow them up. And there are a decent amount of squishies out there, right? Even in top lane, you've got your Camille or Fiora. If you're able to hook those later on over a wall or something, they're probably going to die. Obviously, ADCs are great targets, and then things like even Kha'Zix, Nidalee, Kindred, you know, a lot of these squishy champs in the jungle are still going to be good targets. So Leona and Nautilus, not as good. You might be able to blow them up if you pull them out of position, but it's going to be better against Nautilus because you can break his shield with your ultimate. But anyway, so very one-dimensional, but good at the one dimension if you land those hooks. So particularly against enchanters, he's going to be strong. And then like Thresh's base stats are just so low, and that's probably why he's fallen off a little bit. His matchup into Nautilus is not great, and Leona is kind of a skill matchup. If you can flay back her E, then he can be pretty good, but you have to, like, you can outskill those types of champs a lot of times, especially Leona, but it's tough, man. I mean, even if she lands her ult, right, if she, like, ults you from really far away, and then engages on you with her E, you're probably going to get blown up, because you can't flay her back if you're stunned, right? So anyways, he's okay, but he still just has a lot of utility, right? He's got a pretty good hook. You don't have to follow up on it. It can just be used for the CC, and then he's got his flay, but it just feels like you always have to hard outplay the enemy, and his engage is just, it's not as guaranteed. Like, it's lower probability than something like a Leona or a Nautilus, because his ultimate's like super short range and is kind of good for peeling. It's on a long cooldown, so he just doesn't have as much reliability in his kit as some of the other champs. So it's a bit lower, but if you do play him absolutely perfectly, then he can still be strong. And then I decided to put Lux and Morgana in there. Are you about ready, dear? Did they text you?
They haven't called yet, but it's almost 5, so...
Okay, well, call them and ask. I'm almost done. Sadie. And then Lux. I think Lux is a little underrated. She can be strong right now. She's got a long-range bind. She's got good harassment with her E, decent scaling off of Athene's plus Ardent. They did nerf her shield a ton. But she's still pretty good. Especially she's great into Rakan, because that straight skill shot with the Q is really annoying to work around. And then the if you manage to, hit the barge, it can be pretty good. That's kind of a skill matchup. If you hit him, you're probably going to be able to do a lot of damage to him. But if he hits you with his ult, you don't have any way to dodge it, so you're probably going to die. So she's all right. She's just like, if you want the poke, harassment, AP type of champion that scales really well with enchanter items, so you don't have to pay 3,000 gold for the AP items, then Lux is going to be a good choice. And then the final one that I'll talk about here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up, is just Morgana. The Black Shield is very useful against a lot of engaged champs, which are, most of the champions right now. So that is very strong, and if you do hit your bind with your Q, that is very, very good. It's just she doesn't do a lot else other than that. Like, her W doesn't really do anything, and then her R is, like, very short range, so you can kind of use it to peel, but it's not insane. But she's okay. She's just very, I guess, two-dimensional, right? She's got the Black Shield, which is super strong, and she's got the bind, which can be very good if you're able to consistently land the bind. It's kind of like Blitz, right? Like, it's not as guaranteed you're going to kill him if you hit the bind, but it's still really, really good. But she has just that second dimension as well with the Black Shield, so I don't know. I could see you could put her higher in tier 2, maybe up as high as, like, right under Lulu. But it's just like her roaming's not as good. Like, she's kind of a sitting duck if she roams out. It's like, yeah, you can Black Shield, but you're still going to die to Kha'Zix if he flashes your Q. So, I don't know. Like, whereas, like, Blitz does roam extremely well, right? If you get those Moby boots and you're off to the races, you can put out a lot of pressure on mid lane and, even on the jungler. So, I feel like there's just more catch potential with Blitz versus Morgana, but either way, she's pretty good at what she does. She just doesn't roam well, but she's very good at protecting people from a lot of CC, if that's what your team needs. Anyways, that's going to be it. Some of the other ones, the Sona and Soraka, I moved down a little bit. They do scale super well, but they are just very, very vulnerable to a lot of the popular champs. Same thing with Yuumi. Very high scaling, but the game's just a little fast, I think, for them right now, because they don't roam well, and they are susceptible to all-ins in the laning phase. And yeah, I mentioned all the other ones that are probably worth mentioning at this point. I think I talked about Brand earlier. People might ask about him. It is going to help him out, but I still think his itemization is kind of rough, and he's just going to get, annihilated by a lot of these other champs out there. The lower the elo, though, I think the better Brand and Zyra get. So if you're playing in like bronze or maybe even like into silver, maybe Zyra and Brand can be good because people are not going to close out games as fast. That's going to give you a chance to get a bit more money, and you'll have more opportunities to hit those skill shots, and people aren't going to punish you as much if you miss them. So maybe Zyra and Brand do get a little bit better. Once you start to get into the silver, the bronze, and the iron range, you could probably move those up a little bit, and then subsequently move them down a little bit as you start getting into platinum and diamond. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.